Let me ask you a quick question. If you work a 9 to 5, which better describes your life? Do you feel stressed out, unsupported, and just like you'd rather be at home? Or do you go into work eager to see your coworkers and feeling like you had a productive day? Depending on your answer, I can almost guarantee the root cause of how you feel. Whether you like it or not, your manager can make or break your job. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Tyler Warlow. I make videos on things I wish I knew when I was younger. All of these videos center around how to improve your life through your confidence, capabilities, and overall happiness. As I was saying, your manager can make or break your job. And frankly, having a good manager can make a somewhat crappy job much more bearable, or having a bad manager can make a job that's overall great into something that's really terrible and frustrating to deal with. In today's video, I figured I would discuss several red flags that your managers could be giving you. And frankly, if they are giving you a few of these, you should seriously consider potentially leaving your job. I'm going to be going over some of the most common ones, some of my own personal stories, and of course, saving the most important one for last. If that sounds interesting to you, let's go ahead and jump into the video. One of the biggest red flags that you'll probably run into when dealing with a manager is a manager who does not lead by example. This is a manager who commonly asks their employees to do the things that they themselves are not willing to do. Unfortunately, a common mindset that a lot of managers end up having is that they did the time, so to speak, so they no longer have to do the hard and difficult work that the lower employees have to do. Whenever you ask your employees to do something that you yourself are not willing to do, you are essentially saying to them that you don't care how they feel. A lot of times this leads to employees feeling stressed and undervalued in their current workplace because they're being asked to do tasks that are frankly menial and difficult things to do. This goes beyond just the work itself though. This also goes into when you are being asked to work, how often you are being asked to work, and the expectations around that. Some examples that I've personally heard of is when an office has started getting short-staffed and employees are starting to have to put in extra hours. The manager starts forcing employees to do extra hours under the threat of being fired if they don't, but the manager themselves doesn't hold themselves up to that same standard. Another common one I see is that employees are expected to come and be in person even in dangerous conditions such as hazardous weather, but then management actually chooses to stay home because they didn't feel safe. This gives the impression that it's okay for management to break the rules simply because they are management. If you notice your manager commonly doing stuff like this, you might want to take that as a sign that there might be worse things down the road. One of the most common red flags that you'll run into management is the micromanager. This is a manager who really just doesn't leave you alone to do your own work. Some examples of management that might fall in this category include the following: a manager that is constantly asking for status updates on the status of your work and don't trust you to actually be making progress on that work. A manager that dictates every single detail of a task, not trusting you to figure it out and take the appropriate steps on your own. And finally, the most egregious of these three is a manager who just simply redoes their employees' work. Frankly, all three of these demonstrate something that we'll touch on a little bit later, which is essentially that the manager doesn't have any trust in their employees. When the manager is constantly asking for status updates, or redoing work done by their employees, this makes the employees feel like they have no agency to do their own work. When an employee doesn't feel like they can take agency over their work and be responsible, it typically makes them feel like they have no reason to really be doing the work. This can lead to drops in both productivity and morale, which as a whole results in an effectiveness decrease in the team. Unfortunately, a micromanaging manager is someone who constantly feels like they have to have control. So unfortunately, it's unlikely that you're going to see an improvement in this space. If you feel like your manager is starting to micromanage you, you can always try to have the conversation. However, that's going to bring us to the next point, which is your next red flag in a manager is someone who is not willing to have constructive conversations. Obviously, when decisions are made by management or higher ups, there's going to be some questions centered around that. When employees or team members come to management and they present their questions, if management is not willing to discuss or answer those questions thoughtfully, then you might want to start being a little bit more aware of management's actions. If management isn't willing to discuss questions thoughtfully, it means that either A, they don't really care, or B, they haven't taken the time to actually figure out why the decision was made themselves, or C, it wasn't communicated to them at all. All three of those scenarios are not good scenarios to be in within a company, as it's clearly demonstrating that communication is not effectively happening. This can of course lead to repeated offenses where employees are just feeling frustrated and confused at the state of things. Now, in the last red flag I mentioned, if you feel like your manager is starting to micromanage you, you could always attempt to have the conversation with them. And of course, that conversation can go one of two ways. The manager takes that feedback constructively and actually adjusts their behavior, not realizing that their actions were making the employee feel the way that they did. Or it can go the second route, which is a sign that they can't have constructive conversations, and that's that they take the critical feedback personally. Being able to implement constructive criticism is actually a pretty important skill for any employee to have, let alone management. So if your management is not willing to take feedback constructively and they have a tendency to take it personally, then that's a pretty big red flag, because frankly, it shows that they're not willing to take responsibility for their own shortcomings. A good manager is someone who is willing to take responsibility not only for their own actions, but also for the actions of the team, because a manager recognizes that the team is their responsibility. If your manager is constantly giving excuses or pointing the finger for different reasons, then that is a warning sign that you might be dealing with this in the foreseeable future. And finally, another sign that they're not really open to constructive conversation is that they just frankly don't make the time for it. Now, don't get me wrong, you have to recognize that management does usually have other responsibilities beyond just talking to their employees. However, if it is not a priority in any sense to actually make sure that they are talking to their employees, getting feedback on the day-to-day work, having an insight into the things that are happening within the office/work environment, then it shows that they really don't care that much about the effectiveness of the team, and they really care more about themselves and how they present themselves to management. This usually can lead to a pretty toxic work environment, as employees don't feel valued, they don't feel heard or seen, and they don't feel like there is any path forward on any issues that are present. Not making time to talk to team members is actually going to lead me to my next point. Another common red flag that you'll see from management is that they aren't willing to consult the team in any of the decisions that are being made. Whether it was from engineering making decisions for operators, or whether it was upper management making decisions for the day-to-day office worker. I have seen this time and time again, and frankly, it comes down to management thinking that their decision is going to make some improvement and that they want that improvement to be associated with them. However, they don't actually take the time to learn the day-to-day ins and outs or consult their team to know, is this decision actually going to have the result that I want it to have? When management isn't willing to consult their team, usually you'll see the opposite effect, because if the management is unwilling to be involved in the day-to-day, as I discussed earlier, they usually don't have a truly solid understanding of the processes that happen within their workplace. So they make a change in the effort of improving efficiency, productivity, improving workplace culture, but they actually end up resulting in having the opposite effect because they didn't really understand the current workflows. You can imagine how this makes the employees feel on a day-to-day basis, as they constantly feel like management is making changes that make the situation worse rather than better. This kind of thing can lead to high turnover rates, as employees get fed up with dealing with management constantly trying to improve things and constantly make it worse. This goes back to the employee feeling like they have no agency and that their input really doesn't matter, which of course is not a good feeling to have in the workplace. This is going to bring us to the final and biggest red flag. The largest red flag that you can possibly have for management is that you do not trust them. This can apply to a wide range of situations, but if you don't feel like management actually fights for you, then frankly, you're just not going to be in a good workplace environment. I think everyone can recognize that management deals with a lot of crap on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes they're not going to be able to get to everything, especially nowadays where we have shortages in the workplace and more responsibility is falling on management. This can sometimes lead to some bad decisions being made or some gaps in the day-to-day work, but if you have trust in your management, that's going to make up for some of those shortages because frankly, they're human too. We all have bad days and I think we can all recognize that. It's important that you feel like your management has your back. That's going to be that they fight for you in multiple situations, whether it is for that promotion, whether it is for that pay raise. They're going to see your value and they're going to push for your value to be seen by the rest of the company. If you don't feel like you can trust them to do that, then do you really feel like you're actually going to get that promotion or that pay raise that you've been hoping for? Most likely not. Management can also take away a lot of trust from their employees by lying to them, and this is usually seen through their actions rather than their words. I'll give you a little bit of a story from one of my own personal experiences. I was working with a team at a client site that was unfortunately not so great, and they were constantly changing our schedules on us. They ended up asking us to do third shift work, but without any additional compensation. So of course no one wanted to do it because third shift work is hard to do, especially when you're constantly being asked to switch back and forth. Now, management ended up doing some pretty dirty stuff that left us as a team with a little bit of a sour taste in our mouth. So first they came to our team as a whole and asked if anybody was willing to do it. Of course, no one really wanted to, and we had all discussed it on this and gotten on the same page. They then, of course, started reaching out to us individually. I said, sure, I'm willing to do this extraordinary work for some compensation. I got the verbal confirmation that they could make the compensation that I was asking for work, and we agreed that I would take over the third shift. Now, of course, whenever you're dealing with management that might not be the most trustworthy, you should always try to get it in writing, which is what I did the next week when I sent out an email to confirm what we had agreed upon. I of course didn't hear anything for a week, so I then followed up when they quickly retracted and said, oh, we actually don't feel like we can do that. Would you be willing to do it for less than we had discussed? I told them, given the situation and what it was taking me away from, that I really couldn't do that. That's when they went behind my back and asked other team members if they were willing to do it for much less compensation that I was asking for. And of course, I never would have known if my team members hadn't come to me and said something themselves. This of course left me and my team members with a pretty sour taste in our mouths, feeling like management was trying to play us against one another. Frankly, it's my opinion that if you don't trust your management, then you're going to have a hard time working for this company because you're going to have a hard time progressing in the company and you're going to constantly feel like you're undervalued and underappreciated. If your management happens to do a few of these red flags, then I think it's really worth considering potentially looking into new positions because like I said earlier, how your management approaches their relationship with you and your work can really make or break your workday. But that's going to bring us to the end of today's video. If you found the information in it to be helpful or informative at all, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to join me along in this self-improvement journey. If you have any of your own thoughts, ideas, or opinions on the information in this video, please be sure to leave a comment down below. I like to read and respond to all of them. But if after watching this video you feel like it might be time to start looking for a new job, be sure to check out this video right here, which details 6 things that will help you to get a new job. If you're more interested in my most recent stuff, be sure to check out this video right here. But until the next time, this is Tyler Warlow, signing off.